book is Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. And I've read 5 of Malcolm's books, but I gotta say, 3 stars. You know, the thing is, you'll probably want to read this anyways because Gladwell has become such a part of business that the examples are things you're going to want to know, and you're going to want to understand the way that he tells them to the extent that others are influenced in this way. But this book is essentially one of the best examples of how great storytelling cannot overcome the lack of a thesis. I'm going to talk about the good and the bad. The reason you'll want to read this book is it really does cover some of the top news stories of the last 2 years. The book is published September 2019. It's almost like his team went through top stories that you ought to have something to say about. Because Malcolm Gladwell is such an excellent storyteller, at a minimum, you'll be able to tell his story and not feel ignorant in mixed companies. The problem with the book has to do with this disjointed thesis, which is presented across 37 pages. The first bit you get on page 17 after 2 stories, one on police brutality and miscommunication there, and one on the miscommunication between Hernando Cortez and Montezuma. And then he talks about the fact that when miscommunication happens, it can be quite extreme. Fair enough. Problem is, he says, I'm then going to talk about 2 major questions throughout this book. The first one he doesn't present again until page 27, and it has to do with how is it that we can't tell when people are lying to our face? Well, that has nothing to do with Cortez or the police brutality situation. That's why he's got to introduce this whole new body of knowledge about the CIA and how they mess it up. Now, 11 pages later, he tells us the second question, which has to do with the fact that even if we meet someone in person, we might get a worse read. Again, that's got nothing to do with the previous stories at all, so he's got to introduce another body of stories, namely here, Churchill meeting Hitler and thinking the guy's, fine. Now, there is a secondary theme of organization, of transparency, and defaulting to the truth, but it can't be overridden by this larger thesis that he tries to keep coming back to. And the problem is he could have organized it according to types of miscommunication and severity therein, and then kind of come up with a solution. Because he doesn't do that, he's got this section on transparency that's talking about both facial and body language miscommunication, but unfortunately he's talking about rape. People versus Brock, and where this kid, both of them being completely wasted, just misinterpreted in a worst possible way. He's got some people really ticked off to him because the way this story is told is just not great. Now, I find it really unfortunate because there was definitely enough here to exclude some of the stories that made it impossible to stretch that thesis. And in fact, there was great research in the footnotes that probably should have been brought to the front on some of the studies. This is something that I've normally seen in your books, especially Blink and Tipping Point, that just you relegated it to the footnotes, which I thought was very unfortunate. Okay, so speed reading stats. According to Goodreads, it's saying this book is 388 pages. When I look at my cloud library, it's saying 277. So we'll say 277. Took me about 70 minutes. If you are interested in speed reading, come find me. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow.